the person who makes Down the Rabbit Hole, and a lot of you might know me from my old video that I made a long time ago about the furry fandom, named very simply Furries Down the Rabbit Hole. It is the one time, funny enough, that I have received an award for any of my work, and it was actually given by it was from Mark Merlino. Yep, the Ursa Major Award.
Yeah. I'm not.
I have it very proudly. I have it displayed in my in my bedroom.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's very important to me. But yes, I have had a fair bit of time, both in personal experience and in more structured research time, learning about the furry fandom. And today I have someone who has been in the fandom for a very long time. Changa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, Changa Husky. I'm TikToker, video producer here at Furality, and I'm also my family for many decades. Was Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly, who started the first furry convention back in the 80s. I live in a furry museum and have been on staff of lots of conventions going back to Conference. Now, I wasn't in the fandom like in the 80s, and I got in the early to mid 90s, but I aged in dog years in the fandom, being kind of at ground zero of so many things. Our household has also run furry parties monthly since like 2005. And we are, if you've seen, anybody has seen the Ash Coyote documentary, The Fandom, that is about my family is prominently in there. Mark and Rodney and my hands appear in that documentary. I'm very camera shy, but yeah. But
I've gotten to meet Ash actually. Just online. Great. I've gotten to talk with Ash. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, today I wanted to take the opportunity to ask some questions of Changa. I feel like I come at the fandom from the perspective of an outsider. I have learned quite a bit. I have quite a few friends, but I still have an outsider's perspective, and given my knowledge, I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you. This isn't purely academic. This is also personal. I just have an interest in the way that the fandom has evolved over time and what it looks like and how it changes and how it is changing. And one thing that I really wanted to talk about is specifically the differences, but the differences in the old fandom, but also how the old fandom is very similar to the current fandom and has informed it in a lot of ways. I feel like there are a lot of I almost want to call them shibboleths, things that are left over from the old fandom that that may not have their old meaning anymore, but still act as a stand-in for something, for a concept that is currently in the fandom. And I feel like the best place to start this interview is how people entered the fandom back in the 80s during your time, right? How did you end up in the fandom? Because you ended up in the Prancing Skiltaire, correct?
Well, but that was like in the mid 90s when I got involved in basically moved into this kind of ground zero sort of situation. But the 80s, people were organizing in a very different way. There was a lot of activity, furry parties at fan conventions, things like WorldCon, LostCon, things like that. They would have, and this is very similar to today, in that, there are parties like at con where you put the posters, with art, all over the lobby and whatever, and it'd be a room. In this case, it would be people sketching in like black sketchbooks. But early, in '84 and '85, Mark and Rodney and it had basically started, saying, "Oh my God, this art is amazing," and they would start having originally they were called Skiltaire parties. They would put, the signs up around con, and people would,
And-
go in the rooms. Yeah.
To note, the word Skiltaire is a made up word. That's something that we know, right? I'm trying to keep in mind what other people might
totally.
not know.
Skiltaire.
A Skiltaire. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and explain it?
Well, Skiltaire is like Protogen and such. It's an early created species in the fandom. And in fact, the Prancing Skiltaire is kind of a weird, geeky reference to Lord of the Rings, the Prancing Pony. And,
right, the Prancing
in this
Pony.
case,
Yeah.
but they're kind of big electric space weasels, like weasels, antenna. They're little telekinetic, and there's a whole lore.
I remember listening to an old podcast that Mark and Rod were recording. Like, this is an ancient podcast. They made Skiltaires because they loved mustelids. They loved ferrets.
Yes.
I think it was stoats.
Oh, yeah.
But they felt like they weren't deserving of being stoats. And
especially like otters, because I mean Rodney was pretty much like
otters.
otters are just too cool. He doesn't deserve to be an otter.
Yeah.
But the other aspects, like early science fiction, like Star Trek, aliens, of course, it's budgetary. It's just like humans with weird crap on their foreheads.
Right.
It's like, oh, we'll just paint them green and call it an alien. And they're like, well, where's the this? More aliens, and Mark created.
Right.
I think he created them in high school. The species, and they became the mascot of CFO, Cartoon Fantasy Organization.
And then this became a. It helped them fit into sci-fi conventions easier.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, and understand, culture furry comes out of like a broader fandom culture. Like specifically back in there, there's a lot of things that were a part of conventions that is just general fandness. That just pretty much spread right into furry. A lot of the structures, and I mean we have a lot of similarities to all other fan cultures,
right?
But we our own weirder take on it, because we're not a fan of a property. We're fans of our own creations. The number of times I've had to try to explain it to just some random fan at something like Comic-Con, and they couldn't quite understand what are you really fans of, and it's like,
right, because science fiction, fiction was very narrow. You could get your science fiction stories in periodicals. You also had more specific cons, like you had Star Trek cons. You have things that are very centralized. And this kind of gets to another thing I wanted to ask. When you have a fandom that is very clearly extant, like there are people who really like this thing, how do you bring those people together? I can only imagine. And this is one small blind spot, right? People talk about the beginning of the furry fandom being these conventions, but that can't be where it started. It has people had to meet each other first.
Well, and the seeds were in things like the furry parties, because they were networking. Right. But then fanzines, things like APA and fanzines were kind of the ways they would iterate. In fact, we have scans of some of these on conference.com, but things like Furversion, those were early fan, fanzine that I know Mark and Rodney worked on. And it's funny if you look through them. I had to censor a lot of those, not for content, but for personal information. Because the several pages is just a directory of people to write to with phone numbers. So you get the fanzine and you find these other people and trade. Now, there was also a very influential APA. Now, APA is a little different from a fanzine. It's like a group of artists.
Yeah,
all
this was
members.
something I covered in my video. Yeah, in order to get one, you have to contribute to it.
Right. And everyone would get together at a party with photocopies of their contribution, and they would collate them into separate their own issues, and they would bind them, and everyone would take them home.
Yeah,
And
this
it's
is
almost
super
like
janky. Like
super jank.
if you ever go online, like I absolutely encourage people to go onto the conference website, right?
Conference.com.
Yeah, I encourage you to go to the archives and look up these old APAs, the APAs, because they have been photocopied like 5 times, and they are barely legible in places. And it's amazing that this is like where so much of the artists connecting with each other got their start.
And like Brower Brazzle, which I think is even still going, actually, very influential. Although they were very insular, right? They're almost like private blogs of these artists. Because, I mean, there'd be like art, comics, and like con reports and whatever they had on their mind. And there was a lot of like networking, the early fandom there. Interesting to note, some notable people in Brower Brazzle. Chris Sanders was a member. He's the person who did Lilo and Stitch early on. I mean, there are interesting people. Now, a lot of this also came out of funny animal fandom, which is not funny animals, but animals in the funny, so comics, but also kind of that independent comics, the underground comics, things like Fritz the Cat and all these things that were talking about more adult themes using animal people. In fact, actually, it was Brower Brazzle where Omaha the Cat Dancer was created. Actually, no, that was Voody. Voody was another early fanzine, very influential. There are scans of that on conference.com.
Yes.
And that was other, there was quite a number of these fanzines, which I honestly need to get help with people to scan more of this stuff and make it available.
And they got very niche sometimes. I remember there being one for TARS specifically.
There's all sorts of, and it's much like all other subcultures. I mean, punk has their zine, back in the day culture, there is that kind of urge to, staple all this stuff together and sell it. I mean, you think that's kind of a lost art, but I've seen like TikToks where people talking about, hey, make your own, zine. So there's still kind of that maker, there's something to be said of these weird physical photocopied and printed, artifacts that like the digital stuff these days kind of lack. But that's like a lot of the early networking, like in the 80s. And then, of course, the conventions, the early conventions. Well, technically, they started in '89 when things really took a turn. Versus, all of this writing to each other and and paper, sort of stuff. I mean, like basically 1990s when things started going digital with the internet, because furries, we were on the internet very early. I mean, I got on the internet in 1989. I had to like force my way in, and I am lucky I did not get in legal trouble for the ways I got on the internet, but that's another story. But there were other ways that people started meeting early on, and the internet then was very text-based. There was no web.
Right. We're talking like BBSs, bulletin board systems.
Well, that is the other way. Yeah, mugs. BBSs were actually pre-internet, and admittedly, that was the other way people were connecting. There was a Tiger's Den BBS, which I think it was kind of funny. When I saw your video on the Fandom, and I'm like, oh, an outsider doing history. Oh, crap. And I'm watching it going, oh, we got that right. Oh, wait, that's right. Holy crap, that's right. Oh, wait, I scanned that. I scanned that. Oh, I scanned that one too. Oh, he raided my archive.
I did. Thank you very much.
Which was respect. That was great. But the only thing that I went like, oh, that's not quite right, is when you talked about the Tiger's Den BBS and it being sold to Mark. Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things like, that doesn't matter. But it technically, Andre Johnson, who ran the Tiger's Den, which was really the first. Yeah, well, he didn't sell it. It was just here. Andre Johnson was a roommate here. Very close to Mark and Rodney. Very, 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 well, they were all boys. Yeah.
So mischaracterization, yeah.
Yeah. No, but they were family, and he ran the BBS here. I that is one thing that I really need to contact him and bug him, because I've been looking for archives of that, like floppy disk. Can I recover? And there's absolutely nothing in the house.
So to explain, BBS's bulletin board systems were a sort of proto-internet. I think there are a lot of people in the fandom don't know what a BBS is.
Oh, well, that's true.
The fandom is old enough at this point that we have people coming in who have no idea what a BBS is. So a BBS is a short for bulletin board system, which is sort of a pre-internet way that you can, or a forum. Yeah, it's a proto-forum.
Yeah.
It's a proto-forum where people could connect via phone lines in order to interact. Like, you had to get a special box in order to get this to work. You had to get a modem, and then that would allow you to connect to a specific box if you knew exactly all of the codes, which made them a little bit exclusive.
Well, you only need to really know the phone number. There was a lot of conventions, like you knew like the sort of like speed it would connect to. Ooh, at 2400 baud, actually 300 then. That's like 40 characters a second. Like, you could watch it and like read.
You could have maybe like 3 people on it at any given time.
That would have been
you had to wait.
That would have been dudes. That would have been high end. No, honestly, it was somebody's home computer with a modem on a phone line, and you would set your thing to auto dial to get in. I mean, I used to go to this one BBS that had a game, and I just basically have to keep dialing until I eventually got in. It's just like, but the high end was, if they had more than if they had more than one phone line, oh god, that'd have been like, ooh, like ooh la la. But I mean, I don't think that, and it's usually like an Apple II with a modem and some floppy disk drives, and it would be a message board. It would be, messages. In fact, the Tiger's Den had one of the earliest storyboards. Now, a storyboard, a little bit different. It would have been like somebody would write a paragraph of a story, and somebody else would go in and then add another part, and it would be like it's like role playing and very slow role playing.
It's sort of reminiscent of the way that people on forums on the early internet would pass game files to one another, right? Like, I'm gonna play one year in Dwarf Fortress. Now you take the save file and keep playing this same.
Actually, it'd be like
fortress.
that. Only writing a story, and in this case, it'd be like about furry characters or what have you. A very yes and. It's like improv. And that's kind of like what the mucks were. Mucks. Now, when we actually hop onto the internet in the early days, it's a test. Think of it as a text-based game. There are things called like text adventures, except it's more like a chat room with decorated rooms and props, so you could like go into different directions to different rooms, and like you'd only hear the person within those rooms, and you would role play. There were mucks on any sort of topic. There was a Lion King muck that was popular, early on, but furry muck was like the kind of early place. And oddly enough, I think that actually was running on like a mainframe at like a genetics lab. No joke.
That would not surprise me.
No, seriously. But then again, it was one of the. It still runs. It's still up. You can actually still go to it. No, it really is. And Tapestries is another muck. Hell, I know people who still role play on there.
Furries. If you are watching obviously it's furries watching this stream idea.
Yeah.
There's a stream idea.
Oh, good lord. And there's a lot of conventions into the kind of the role playing would go. You type say and whatever you're going to say, and that's like your dialogue. And then there would be emotion. It's like colon space. I walk over and pet you, and and then it would say so and so does that, which has the joke that my roommate does is colon hugs you. Which is like, oh yeah, thank you.
So when we're talking about this early fandom, these early spaces,
Yeah.
What sort of people are occupying this space? And when I say what sort of people, I mean, are these people that know each other in real life, that have met at conventions going on to these spaces,
well,
or are these
eventually
people who
there's
maybe
that.
are separate?
Well, they were separate. A lot of them would be separate because it's that very early internet where we're all like, holy crap, I can talk to somebody like remotely, cross country. Understand, this is something probably younger people do not get. Calling somebody on a phone, voice, was expensive. You paid by the minute if you called outside of like maybe a few miles. Getting onto that early internet, it's like you're suddenly now chatting with people like all over the world, which is why like I went, oh crap, how can I get myself into some of these computers that I shouldn't be in so I can get onto this internet thing. But there was a lot of access then through colleges, and it's usually, well, that's why there's a term of the internet. It's a very old term, Eternal September, because on the early internet, there was like norms. People acted a certain way, and every September it would just go nuts. People were rude or whatever. It was just people did not act right according to the norms at that point. And that was because that's when all the new college students arrived. Now, there was a point that changed the fandom. A lot of people blamed Mark and Rodney of like, oh my God, they made the fandom gay. They brought in all these gay people. Seriously, this was like okay. Actually, what really changed was a radical shift in the culture. I can't remember the exact date. It was like around like 93. I'd have to look it up right now. But it was, people referred to that as Eternal September. That was the day when AOL connected to the internet and the floodgates opened. It was no longer an exclusive club of colleges and universities and labs and governmental things. And that's when the floodgates of people who are now suddenly finding it very easy to discover other furries all over the world. In places like Furry Muck, but also another thing called Usenet. Usenet message board, but it was a protocol. It still kind of exists. Google has an archive of it called Google Groups.
I looked on some of those to find chatter in like the late early fandom.
Oh, yeah. No, the problem is Google. Years ago, there was a Google, a company started archiving like all of Usenet. And Google bought it. It was originally called Deja News. And at the time, I was like, oh, well, Google has the resources. They'll keep that running. Oh, how young I was. Google was not a great steward. And it's really kind of breaking. But that history is still there. There's another way people were connecting even before that on the early internet was Archie servers. That was a whole weird protocol. Interestingly enough, there's an archive of all of the Archie and Veronica servers. That was like its own search protocol. On archive.org, you can download this huge torrent file and like search all this tech stuff. I've been meaning to dig through there at some point, but when I have a spare time to download like several terabytes worth of old internet. But specifically Usenet, in fact, Alt-Fan Furry was kind of like for a while in that early 90s.
Alt-Fan Furry,
people,
by the way, Alt-Fan Furry being the name of the board, right? People made... Yeah.
Usenet had a hierarchical kind of ways that, because it was way more than Furry, and they were, like various top-level topics. Alt was like a grab bag, so like Alt-Fan Star Trek, Alt-Fan blah, and there was Alt-Fan Furry, like a dot between to the words, and that was that early period where you think the drama is bad on social media. It was pretty bad on Alt-Fan Furry. It was we've always had our strife. Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It was very fun. It was very fun looking at some of these old posts because the thing and the reason that I wanted to call this the cyclical fandom is because of actually an experience I had looking through those specific boards.
Look familiar,
I discovered people complaining that people who people were sexualizing furry and that it didn't used to be this way and it shouldn't have been this way.
And it's like,
all of the old arguments are new. Everything that is
really
new
hilarious
is
about
old.
that is like, excuse me, really? We have plenty of proof that it was always
right.
That.
No,
even
furry's
then,
always been horny. Furry's always been gay. Furry's
God,
if you look at these ancient zines, there is never a time. There is never a time where it hasn't been this way.
No, entirely true. Although, well, in the whole oh my God, I will say some of the anti-queer stuff that happened during that early '90s. Some of the differences then was a very different time period. In fact, looking back, I think how radical it was for Mark and Rodney, a queer couple, to be upfront visibly running this convention. I mean, now mind you, all the fandoms, there was a lot of that. I mean, understand. We talk about we'll talk about shipping and all the kind of queer shipping that occurs in other fandoms now. You can lay some of that to Star Trek fandom back in the 70s. There was a term called slash fiction, which the slash was for Kirk/Spock. There was so much fanzines like that.
To be fair, valid.
Well, no, entirely valid. And understand in that period, in the late 80s, it's it took a while. Even then, it was always there, but there was a period where people got very angry, especially at Mark and Rodney, as they start trying to say, well, what are all these now openly gay people around us? Well, fandoms, and this is true of other fandoms too, is we've all been usually a little bit more open to, well, being a little bit more open. And that caused a lot of strife, back in the alt fan furry days. In fact, they used to use a term called lifestyler, and God, the more I look at it, the more I think there were undertones, the way people would say that. It's kind of you're taking this fandom thing a little bit too seriously. Yeah. So some of these arguments, much like pup hoods and that sort of thing. Admittingly, I realize some of these screams back in the early fandom, about how wild and untamed it was. I look back, because some of those that I was at, I'm like, really? And I realized, one guy wore a harness in the lobby.
Right.
Oh my God. Oh no. Is wild and untamed. No. It's always been like this. In fact, that I find interesting, like we say, the cyclical fandom, is a point that somebody had brought up. There was an article, I think Sotek talked about, the discourse that keeps happening every so often on Twitter. The pup hoods, kink at pride, just all of these things that we roll our eyes and haven't we argued about this? But he pointed out the way conventions lately, over the past, even since the pandemic, how the population is massively increasing. We're hitting an inflection point. Our population is growing very, very quickly. But there's a lot of factors, I'm sure. And that's why, Eternal September, the September thing back in the day, we suddenly have these influx of younger people who haven't beaten these arguments to death, and we end up having to re-experience them. And so, there really is kind of a cyclical nature to all of these debates and arguments and fights and, shall I say, drama and all of that sort of thing.
And when we say young people, I think to clarify, you're talking about young people that are being brought in by social media, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, and when I say young, believe me, I'm old. You know, you're 20, you're young. You know?
Young as
Well,
in
you
people
are.
who don't remember BBSs and
Oh yeah, well yeah. Oh, I've had hit so many points where I'm talking about something in the media, and it's like, oh, what's that? And it's just like, oh, I think my joints hurt now. It was that moment when I realized that like, wait, Rugrats was 32 years ago. Oh dear. And I don't know. Then somebody's like, "What's Rugrats?" And then I just want to crawl under my bed. And just not that I was a fan of that show, but it's just. But that's not something that I don't think of as like being being old. But yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. Ooh, time. Oh crap.
You've been around long enough, at the very least, to see 3 cycles. The beginning, like the.
Oh
or I guess,
yeah. Well, at least a
like,
few,
and
because
that's
we had others in the 90s. I mean, there were moments, even the later 90s, and let's be fair. And hell, right now, I will say VR chat and like the pandemic created a completely different environment. Things shifted. I mean, before VR chat, there was always kind of a rift between the fandom across the coast. I mean, there was rivalries between the East and West Coast, especially from the point of view of me, like con staff and because con staff people. There's an entire set, our own sets of weird drama and pain and masochism. But
you hear that? You hear that, Furality? You're getting called out right now.
Oh, believe me, I'm staff here. Actually, I gotta say, and
you little garbage piles.
I was on staff of the last physical con I was staff of. When it went under, I was like, well, I won't say that word out loud because they'd have to bleep me, but ever being on a staff ever again, never again. I'm staff at Furality. Right. It actually has been a great experience.
Can't escape. I'm reminded of people who quit League of Legends. I quit. I'm clean. And then they're back like, oh, my friends downloaded and invited me. Oh, I'm back. I'm back fighting.
Well, they were looking for a video editor, and I'm like, I'm good at editing. I should. Yeah, that's how they get you. That's how they get. But here, especially 2020, which was like this was refuge during the pandemic. I mean, it was one big furry party. There was a lot of drinking and a lot of things that I probably won't. There was a lot of.
There was a lot. It was a lot.
There was a lot. There was a lot. Yes, but what was interesting is suddenly, for the first time, people across the globe in this community were mingling every night, partying, talking, and getting to know each other. And a lot of rivalries, and a lot of rifts that were kind of I think, melted away. I mean, I'm sure other dramas appeared, but
of course,
it really changed things in kind of a fundamental way. And I think a lot of physical cons were trying to figure that out over the past few years. Anybody who's ever gone to the VR chat meetup at MFF for a few years might understand that a lot of the physical cons hadn't figured out how big this community actually is. And I think this con is going to prove it.
Yeah, it is a significant contingent. I know that there are people who think of themselves as not just furries, but VR furries. Like that is that is their experience of furry, period.
Oh yeah, and it is another point that has, I think, fundamentally changed the entire community. And I think in many positive and probably negative. I mean, every change that occurs there's ups and downsides. Yeah.
I think that this is actually a really good place to sort of tie it up and go to Q&A because I think we have seen so many cycles, right? We have seen 3 or 4 cycles of new people coming in, new Eternal Septembers. It's a really good description of it. And now we are at a point where we are seeing very similar ideas coming, but we are also entering untrod territory. And this is the scary point, right? Is this where a news cycle is discovered? Is this something completely
Maybe.
separate? This is like, and this is the scary point. Like, we've been able to sort of predict everything. Everything is old until now. Like, the question is, how long will that hold true? And and that's where we're at right now. This isn't to incite concern or anxiety. This is what the fandom is now, and it's fascinating to see where it is and where it will be.
There's one point I want to make, because we haven't talked much about Mark Merlino, my partner, who died, one of the founder of Conference, who died earlier this year. I'm reminded of a moment when he did panels here, because he was into VR. He did Ask a Grey Muzzle at Furality Aqua, and it's like the aqua, the crystals and the trees and all that, and the little Skiltaires on stage, and people started asking, asking him questions, and one person got up, young fur, and asked, like, what do you see the future of the fandom? And I'm sitting there like,
come on, man, you're in it.
It's like, yeah, it's like, dude, and inside it was kind of like, yeah, look, we're kind of there,
and this is the perfect time to start taking questions, I think, from the future of the fandom. We intended to give 20 minutes over. We've got about like 15 minutes left.
I'm sorry,
into that time a little bit. This was excellent. I think this was fantastic. There's no way that I could cut it off at that point.
Oh, that's fair. So quick,
but yes, we have people in the Discord. I believe that's where we're going to be pulling all of our questions, right, Demmy? Hi, Demmy.
Yep.
Demmy.
Go to the Cyclical Fandom Q&A channel in our Discord under the event Q&A section. You should see it. It should be open, and there's a bunch of questions there currently. There's a few wonderful questions. I'm going to start with a question I'm kind of curious about. From Shally Dragon, our UX team lead. What is a trend from the early fandom that you would like to see make a resurgence today?
Oh my God. Early. Fab. Well, that's hard. That's hard. I'd have to really think about that.
No worries.
Yeah. Because I mean, there's so much.
Maybe a con practice that isn't done anymore. Like that. Like I feel like a lot of things that are online have manifested in various ways in the current.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, there are things back in the day that the art shows were huge because like the physical art was more important, and it took them a while to people to really get a digital. But I do feel like that's still kind of a factor, but not as big. But a lot of the really great practices back in the day are still alive. And I can't think of it. There was, and it's very silly, there was always an internet room, which was kind of funny. There'd be terminals set up, and you'd log onto Furry Muck. There'd be like little wise text terminals, and you go in there and start mucking from the con. And I don't know if
that is so thematic for this con, like this con's theme, right?
Yeah.
You have terminals set up.
Yeah, pretty much. And we were talking like green, amber, terminals. I do remember that. Eventually, it turned into kind of an internet lounge with computers, and there's kind of that stuff going on with like gaming rooms. There used to be things that were like the pet auction. They used to have these at science fiction conventions where they do a charity thing where they'd auction people off. In fact, I have a wonderful memory of, I think it was a Worldcon, where I saw Klingons carrying a furry, on poles, tied up, like from a hunt, and they auctioned them off at a party. But there are logistical weirdnesses about that sort of stuff. Maybe that just stays in the past. I don't know if any conventions do that sort of stuff.
One of those things where it's like, maybe there's a way to do this right. Maybe honestly, there's so many pitfalls that it's like, is it really worth it?
Well, at science fiction conventions called them slave auctions. No joke. That's what. Oh yeah. Well,
Okay, okay, that's a
when
little
Mark and
spicy.
Rodney did it, they called it a pet auction because it's like, are you kidding me?
Maybe a good idea.
And there
Holy
were
cow.
and there were rules. There were rules. Like there
Goodness
was a lot of things
gracious.
that you were not allowed to do. Basically you'd hang around the person, and it was like a whole bunch of money went to charity. But yeah, I don't.
Right, yeah,
I don't
this-
see
yeah,
a way
this
of
isn't-
doing that these days.
Right,
I'm
yeah. At the very least, like the optics, right? Like best case
Oh,
scenario,
God,
the
yeah.
optics are atrocious, even if everything goes fine. Like,
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
the
And,
best
it's funny. A
case.
lot of and there's a lot of history, like in science fiction conventions, that are kind of lost. I'm kind of amazed by just the sheer amount of tapes that I need to get to digitizing, because Mark had recorded a lot of footage at the old science fiction conventions, which has a lot of that sort of culture, which was just like taken straight into ours. Because I mean, we drew from the same sort of people. Legitimately, when they were looking to find people, there was a thing called the Fandom directory, which is like a little phone book of just people and their interests, and you could write to them like, I need a list of people who are into animation, this, and this. That's how they actually first got sent out flyers for conference zero, is like legitimately mailing. Oh god, yeah, back in the day, and I'm glad we don't do this anymore. Mailing. If you've ever spent an afternoon folding envelopes,
have.
to
Yep.
I never want to do that again. I don't. I'm babbling.
It's-
Next question.
It's fine. It is heartening to hear that a lot of the traditions that even someone who's been in the fandom for so long are still represented, and that's heartening.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
heartening
yeah.
to me. Yeah. Let's,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Let's continue.
Yep, of course. So let's get. I'm interested in this person's question because their name is Bucker Fuskio. As someone who started going to
Oh.
furry cons in 2002. Oh, you know them, maybe.
Yeah, but I know the
Including
name.
conference. Oh,
Yeah,
heck yeah. Did you experience a lot of changes at cons from the early 90s to the early 2000s? They were curious about
Oh.
your experience before they were, before
yeah.
they got to the cons.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the experience is still very much the same. And there are things that are lost from then. I realize, is like I used to run Video Room, which is just like, video going all weekend of various things that you could probably get in trouble for. Let's be clear, showing movies and such. And I kind of miss that, because it was something wonderful, but just walking in and like there's some movie playing, and they always had the little loophole, like never publish the schedule in anything. It's on the wall. You don't use badges to get in. So like, it just happens to be playing over here. And I do miss that from back in the day.
It sounds comfy. Okay,
it is.
There's a part of me. So I'm a big tea dweeb, and one kind of funny little idea I've had is setting up a tea room. So that if people need to retreat, they can, like, it's like a tea party room that's just very
I like
calm,
that.
very quiet. To,
Well, I
like,
mean,
for
they kind of
people
like
to
fans
like,
room
if
like
everything's
that.
been too loud, too stimulating, they can come in for 10 or 15 minutes, get a cup of tea,
Well,
and then go back
it's like
out. Like I just
running
thought this would be fun.
running the video room. I mean, you would go in there like 2 in the morning. There'd be somebody sleeping in the back row, or just relaxing.
Yeah,
And
that's my
and it was-
thought. Like maybe we can do this vibe.
And I had some of the most wonderful experiences like running that. And it got to the point where I would have a media center, little computer. My job would be walk in at the beginning of the con, press a button, and walk away, and hope it stays in sync. but I do miss from that period. But obviously there are legal trouble with that. Because technically you are, it's a little bit of the copyright, but fandom has always been skirting that shit for years. We're always like, somewhere in the, well, there's a reason why my tagline on all my social medias is bootleg ass furry VTuber.
Right. Well, I mean, like, a lot of preservation has come from not caring too much about it, and everyone is very thankful that that people maybe were less prudent about following certain copyright laws.
Well, here's an early fandom thing. There was a movie called Animal Olympics, and it was originally two animated specials. Now, funny thing about that, very important to the early fandom. It was for the 1980 Olympics, and we boycotted the Summer Olympics. It was supposed to be two specials, Winter Games and Summer Games. They never showed the Summer Games because of the boycott. It really screwed NBC and the animation company, Lisberger. Funny thing is, Mark had actually recorded the Winter Games. Now, when it got failed, the company crammed it together in a haphazard movie that ended up on cable. Fans, being fans, they're like, the movie says Summer Games. So they took the Winter Games and they recut the Summer Games movie to remove all the Winter Games and recreated the Summer Games special, and that's what they showed at Con. And funny thing is, we legitimately have the only copy of the Winter Games special, which had footage was never in the movie. And talk about preservation. They're legitimately these like lost media sort of stuff, and the little bit of copyright piracy within fandoms, kind of preserve that stuff.
It's
way
beautiful
back.
animation. Like, take the time. It's short. It's short. Go and watch it. Like, if you have the chance, the animation is gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. I mean, another example of piracy saving something, Nosferatu. Bram Stoker hated that movie. His wife made it a point to buy every copy of that film and destroy it. And the only reason why it exists is there was pirated copies out there that they never got their hands on, which is hilarious. Preservation. I am not advocating piracy, but
You're not advocating.
It
is not legal, but perhaps it is morally correct. That is fine to say. That is morally.
But I mean, it's always been that way within fan spaces. We always, remix. I'm sorry. Okay.
Furality does not condone any crimes.
No.
We do not condone the doing it. We do not condone the doing of it.
But there is something to be said about fan spaces, like the way people do fanzines, like fan art and all that. It's always been like on that hairy edge of skirting all of that. And it's always been an activity within fan spaces, and that's I am babbling again. Another question.
It's fine. Yep. All right. We have time for one more question. I'm gonna try to ask something that's like more open-ended. What's your this is from Mama Volta. What's your favorite and or most interesting part of just all of furry history?
Oh, me and wow. Favorite part. For me, a lot of it's just
open-ended.
It's too open-ended because there's like so much, but. We could talk about a moment that, like for me, gay person, like finding a place where I could actually be open. I came of age in the 80s, mid 80s, and it was not a great time to be gay. The AIDS crisis is just in the media. There was not a lot of representation. Things were not great, especially for me. I lived a few years in Kansas, Topeka, Kansas. So I got to see the Westboro Baptist protesters all the time. It was oppressive. And suddenly coming into fan spaces, it was liberating to actually be open for once in my life. And there was a moment in the late 90s, there was a piece of media, a comic that was like Associated Student Bodies. I don't know how well it ages, but it was
I remember finding this. I remember
it was a landmark comic when it came out. It is a story about a college student, Lion, who goes to college and discovers himself. And it's a very openly queer, gay comic, and it was one of those things that a lot of fans grabbed onto. It was like that moment where like so many people like me, like, thank you, yes. The person Oh God, yeah, I don't know. My brain is a little too frazzled to remember the name. But
It's okay, but I think that it's something that's personal, right? Like it's
yeah.
a representation of like your
Well,
experience.
yeah, and especially I came in with. I was originally my first one originally was Lion. I understand a lot of us. Lion King was like the holy crap. Yes, there was a number of films that have an piece of the media that caused a big influx of people. You know, we had your Robin Hood, Lion King, Zootopia. I think that is like the big ones there. And you know, for years I had a lion. I consider myself Huskian. You know, but you know, yeah, that. I will stop now.
Yeah, we're coming up on our time. I think that the point. I think. To summarize, and I think that this is true for everyone, furry is an extremely personal thing. There's like no one main event. People all have their own individual thing that is really personal, important to them. And it's the fact that it isn't that centralized, that it is so personal, I think that makes it really beautiful and what allows it to stand the test of time, no matter how it changes.
Oh yeah, no, very much so.
We are over time just a little bit. Sorry to.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that.
Interrupt you, yeah.
No worries.
But no, thank you very much for having us on, Changa. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Hope I don't get you in trouble.
We'll see. And thank you for
sorry about the piracy talk to everybody in the team. You know me.
That's the last. Yep. Everyone, the moral of this story is copyright infringement is bad.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Thank you very much, everyone.